Hello and welcome everybody to another brand new episode of AIHR Live. I am your host, Neelie Verlinden, and I hope everybody is doing well. With me today is our guest, Ozlem Sarioglu. Hi, Ozlem.
Hello. Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Now, we'll just wait a little longer for some more people to join.
Okay.
But while we do this, I would like everybody to don't hesitate and let us know where you are watching from, because so far we've had people watching from all over the world. So don't hesitate to say hello and let us know where you're from. Now, something else I wanted to do before we get started is a little bit of housekeeping. You should be able to see us, of course, in your LinkedIn stream. And if you see this LinkedIn Live, you see a button that says share on the bottom right of your screen. So I would really appreciate it if you could share that button so that people see that you're watching, and then they can also start watching this live. So that's it for the housekeeping. And now I can actually give you a proper introduction, Ozlem.
Hello.
So with me today, as I said, is Ozlem Sarioglu, and she is the co-founder and managing partner of Sparkus. Sparkus is a coaching platform that combines AI-assisted coaching with human interaction, and the idea is to make coaching more scalable. Correct me if I'm wrong, of course, Ozlem.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
And Ozlem has a lot of experience coaching. She has done more than 1,500 hours of coaching. And she has also written a book that was published last year, if I'm correct. And now I just need to take a sneak peek at the title of the book. If you give me 1 second. Usually I know, but this was so much to try. Okay, so the title is World Voices in a Polarized World, Applications of Voice Dialogue, Principles to Teams, Organizations, and World Affairs, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So after that introduction, so what is the plan for today? Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk about coaching and coaching culture in organizations. We are going to touch on what HR has traditionally been doing in this field, what's working and what's not. And of course, we'll talk about technology a little bit as well. Now, by the end of this episode, we'll have about 10 minutes for a live Q&A with Ozlem. So please do share your questions, your comments, or your thoughts with us, and we'll get to as many of them as possible by the end of the episode. Okay, after all that, Ozlem, once again, hi.
Hi. It's great to be here.
Yes, it is also very nice to have you here. I think we can get started with the first question, basically. And the first question is a basic one, which is, how would you define a coaching culture? What is a coaching culture?
Yeah. I think in order to define what a coaching culture is, we first need to start with what coaching is, generally speaking, because most of the time organizations know about coaching as a development tool, but it's basically more than a development tool. It's basically a mindset. So we first need to define that. The way the International Coach Federation defines coaching, I'm just going to say it in coaching code. It's coaching is partnering with another person in a thought-provoking and creative process so that it inspires people to maximize their personal and professional potential. So with this definition, I'm going to highlight a few words. One is basically trust. I mean, there is partnering in this situation, so there has to be trust in the whole idea. So it's not, being hierarchical upon somebody and just like, I know everything, but it's really just getting into the arm of the other person and saying like, let's really collaborate, let's find the solution together. And that, of course, requires a basic level of trust. So when we're talking about coaching culture, one of the things that is there is having trust in the organization. The other thing is the thought-provoking and creative process, which means there has to be curiosity. There has to be like, I don't know, kind of a place. So being open to new ideas, being open to not knowing is there in the core of the coaching culture. And the other thing is potential. So the other key word is the potential. There is a belief in the human potential in the coaching process. So when we're talking about a coaching culture, we're talking about an organization where people trust each other, where people have the ability to question and also the willingness to co-create altogether. So, and it doesn't depend, on which level they are. They could be from the management, they could be from the new entry, they could be the top management, doesn't really matter. Anybody is able to make their voice heard and give some contribution to the work. And the other thing is the individuals, the belief in the potential piece is like the individuals need to have the willingness to grow. So they should have a growth mindset.
Yes.
And on top of it, they should have the willingness to grow each other. So the managers have the willingness to grow their employees. And also, it doesn't necessarily have to be a managerial thing. It could be like a peer-to-peer learning also. So all these three things, trust, curiosity, and openness to not knowing, and the last one is the growth mindset, are all combined in the coaching culture.
All right. So that's a really, really good explanation. Thank you very much, especially with these three elements that you say: trust, willingness to learn, and then the growth mindset. So can you perhaps go into what a coaching culture could look like for various parties in an organization? So what can it look like for HR, for employees, for managers? Can you perhaps give an example?
Sure. Let's start with the HR. First, HR generally reads if there is a coaching culture or not, first from the engagement reports. There is always, in the engagement surveys, there are questions about, like, do I have people that I trust in the organization? Does my manager support me when I'm growing? So that is the first place to look at for HR. So if HR sees all these areas on the top scores, they can say that, yes, we have a good coaching culture in the organization, at least a good start for a coaching culture. The other thing is having growth mindset, as I said. So if there is learning agility in the organization, the willingness to learn, if people are really motivated to support each other, join trainings, learn stuff. So that also means that the organization has the coaching culture. And also, of course, we were talking about trust. So if, for instance, the HR is doing some, let's say, a research, and if people are hesitant to join that, so probably there is a level of mistrust in the organization. So those are some signs that the HR can read if there are a coaching culture, or there has to be some support needed to establish that culture. So that's the one level. From the business leader's perspective, it is very much related to performance, actually. So coaching sometimes looks like a very soft process, but coaching is actually, when you divide it into basic pieces, involves some level of exploration and also taking action. So there is a level of accountability, taking responsibility, and also just owning the work altogether. So those all come together. So lots of research has been around that. But one of the core things that has been put down is, if there is a level of trust in the organization, the business performance and the business results as well are 3 times higher than the place where you don't have the trust. So if from the business perspective, business leaders' perspective, it is a very important area to invest on, especially in this period of the VUCA world, the COVID
Yes.
area, where people are all working from their homes. If people have that willingness, that ownership to the work, that engagement level, then you don't need all those other, metrics to follow people if they're doing their work or not. I mean, the results will automatically tell itself. So that is another area for the managers to watch if there is a coaching culture or not. And from the employee's perspective, I think that's one of the other core things. If the employee feels like I'm being seen, my contribution does matter. I can grow myself. People support me. If I don't know something, I'm okay. I have the ability to ask it. So all those things makes it clear that there is a coaching culture in the organization. So if you find that kind of an organization, generally people just are engaged only because of the culture itself. I mean, all the rest, the details, the core area of the work to do comes second. It's first, this really feels like a friend of mine described it like as being at home. She said, oh, that's so nice. I'm in this company. I'm just so much like as if I'm home and working. And so it's just my regular self, my daily self can come into the play. So I don't need to be the proper da. So it's more like being more natural, and like my word counts. All those things are very important for the employees.
Yes. I think that was a really good answer as well. Thank you very much. So if we look at a coaching culture, there are some traditional efforts that HR has made so far.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've seen many more of them than I have.
Yeah.
But can you perhaps tell us what HR has been doing so far and what has been working and what hasn't been working? Perhaps you can give us 2 examples of each.
Yeah, I can first share. I think I shared a slide with you. If you can share
Yes,
it with
you
our
did.
audience. Yeah,
Yeah.
this
So
is
this,
this is about the reach of coaching. So what we encountered over the years, generally organizations that want to build a coaching culture have gone through until that line that where I said the limit of coaching culture. What has been going on is first it starts with the organization trying out executive coaching. So they first give coaching to their top management or people that they choose. They can also try to expand it for some teams that they feel like need some support, but it's
yes.
more like one-point contacts. In order to turn it into a culture within the organization, not just a tool to develop someone or solve a problem, the second level comes when the HR starts being a coach, or they can select some people to be internal coaches. So that's the second level. And then it's like, well, this is going well. These people are benefiting from coaching. The people that receive coaching from internal coaches or HR are really benefiting. So we need to expand it to more people. And
Mm-hmm.
that's generally where coach-like manager trainings come into play. So we start training managers to become coaches. And traditionally, what has been there is like, this is where the coaching culture efforts were stuck, because then you just train coach managers, you just expect them to be perfect coaches, and then they go back home after a few days training, and maybe they try it out, but then in a very split second they can come back to their old habits of telling people what to do, not really listening, especially when there is a crisis situation happening, when there is the
Yes.
time pressure or results pressure, they just start giving comments again, saying like do orders to people, do this and that. So that's generally has been traditional limits of the coaching culture. What is possible now to do more expansion, especially of the two steps. First, when there is an internal coaching pool, we also heard a lot from companies like, we trained all these people, but A, we don't know if they're giving sessions. B, what if everybody asks for a session? How would that be possible to give them a session?
Yes.
So we are using technology to scale the coaching programs, with a limited resource of internal coaches coaching more people, because I'm going to talk about the technology, the possibilities of technology afterwards. But the main thing is they are able to support more people when the basics of the coaching process is handled by technology. Then they can provide more impact in a shorter period of time. So that's one way to make more people get acquainted with coaching, to scale it. That helps. The other process to integrate it more into the culture, I'm just going to go back to the coach like manager trainings. What we found out over the years is it basically has two limits, two barriers. One is managers generally go through trainings to coach people, but they haven't received coaching themselves yet. So they don't really grasp what it means to be coached, what it feels like when you hear a powerful question, to search inside yourself and find an answer. They haven't got that experience. So it has to be there for them to become better coaches. They need to be coached first. The second level is, even though managers receive coaching, their employees have no idea about coaching. So once the manager starts asking questions, employees are like, why is she asking me that? Are they, just interrogating me? Are they just, questioning what my choices were? Am I on a test? So they come to the coaching process with some kind of resistance. And if there are professional coaches watching us, they all know that it's very difficult to coach someone, even though you're a professional of the work, when they are really totally resistant to the process. So managers who just received this training just all of a sudden bump into this a barrier of an internal resistance from their employees. So what we found out is also very important to support the coach like manager trainings with a process where employees learn about coaching. And that's also when technology comes into play, where we can give them digital exercises on the coaching platform, etc., so that employees also start the coaching process, start experiencing it, and get not resistance, but on the contrary, some kind of excitement to discuss what they found out with their manager. So that's the breaking point, and more to trickle it down from the top management to the mid management, and then first line managers, and then all level of employees. Then makes it, of course, it's not just a 1 year thing. It's just like it has to be a phase by phase process, but then it can be integrated into the whole culture.
All right. Thank you. And also thanking for sharing this image with us, because I think that made things a lot clearer. So I'm going to now remove it again, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And to our audience in the meantime, thank you very much for tuning in. So I am talking with Ozlem Sarioglu today, and we're talking about coaching. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts you want to share with us, please do so in the comments, and we'll get to as many of them as possible by the end of this episode. All right, Ozlem, I'm back to you with my next question, which I think is a very interesting one, because I think this is something that, of course, will interest business leaders as soon as HR starts talking about coaching. And that's a question that is, how is a coaching culture linked to the company's overall performance? What can you tell us about that? And perhaps you can again illustrate it with an example.
Okay, great. The first thing is, if there is no trust, if you're going back to the trust issue, and if there is no curiosity, people don't have the willingness to try new things. They just go with whatever is there, whatever has been successful so far. And in a world of VUCA, in a world of lots of disruptions happening, it's really very important that people question what has been there, what has been done so far, because we're in this world where there is like total unknown. So they cannot really replicate the past issues anymore.
Yeah.
And the risk then is then there is no innovation. So I would say for the organization to be more innovative, they need to have the coaching culture. So that's one of the core examples that I would give. Because it's not just a daily nice thing, as I said. It's very much linked to how the company can actually stand all this wave of change. Is
Yeah.
very much linked to it. The other thing is when people don't feel safe, they don't say I don't know, and they don't say I didn't understand this. So people just pretend that they know it. They pretend they understood, and that is much more costly when people start doing lots of mistakes. I mean, the one level is being open to making mistakes and being open to failure, yes, with the
Yeah.
coaching culture, but it also comes with questioning stuff. But
Yes.
then there is the other level of people really pretending that nothing has happened. That's another way. So there is no learning agility there. There is always that fixed mindset. This is how things are in the organization. That's who I am. No, we haven't made any mistakes. I'm
Mm.
perfect. So then the organization really doesn't grow. The people don't grow, and then the organization don't grow.
It sounds to me like a form of denial, to be honest. That way
Exactly.
of thinking. Yes.
Yes, that's
Okay.
complete denial. And
Yes.
of course, I mean, we just know what doesn't grow starts to die. So
Yes.
it's not just the daily performance we're talking about. We're talking about the overall performance of the organization. They cannot stand the competition. They cannot start startups coming into the organization, into the world, that are able to disrupt them, etc.
Yes.
And then the other thing is this is very much linked to what Peter Senge says at the beginning of his famous book. He says, like, when the world is much more dynamic, it's no longer possible for a one clever guy sitting on top of the company to understand what's going on and read all the dynamics and define the strategy and let people start doing that. Once the world is such a dynamic place, we need every individual, and
Yeah.
especially the people who are working on the field, who are facing face to face with the clients, to bring us information. So we need to take their contribution at all levels,
Yes.
rather than just like, this is the strategy, go ahead and implement it. It's the other way around. It has to be from the bottom to up this time. It has to be, they should bring us, like, the clients are asking for this, the clients are saying that, or this is happening in the day-to-day work, so that the whole thing can improve all of a sudden. So it's the performance is basically on all levels. Yes, I mean, these are the reasons. The results, there are lots of, as I said, research done. The Coach Federation has done some research on the strong coaching culture, how it affects the performance of the organization. As I said, there is the Great Place to work on that. There are lots of other research that proves that once there is the coaching culture, there is more performance. And why is that? Is basically what we talked about recently.
Yes. Yes, and I think it's fair to say that we need, in these times, we need basically what they call the wisdom of the crowd. We need everybody's input
Exactly.
and ideas. Yes, I like that very much, and I very much believe in that as well. If we continue a little bit along this line of questioning, I can imagine that probably one of the first questions that you hear from people is, how can we prove, how can HR demonstrate the ROI of, in this case, coaching? So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's generally the core question,
I
because it's
imagine.
especially, I mean, it's always difficult in learning and development and all kind of, I would say, softer places to prove the return on investment. It's even much more difficult in coaching, because in coaching, for people to trust, there should be some level of confidentiality in the coaching dialogue. So that means automatically it's basically a black box. You have no idea what's going on inside it. And that makes it even harder to prove the ROI of it.
Yes.
So I always say there is obviously, like all efforts in an organization, there are no one size fits all. It has to be first, like, what is your strategic goal with the coaching process? So for some organizations, it is behavioral change. For some organizations, they're, let's say, doing some kind of career coaching for their key employees to have a good career path in the organization. So the way you define the measure the ROI of one thing is different than the development, personal development. So there are different ways to measure that. One is, sometimes people just want their employees to get acquainted with the coaching process. So how many people do we coach is a good criteria to calculate the whole process. So for other organizations, it could be based on, let's say, an innovation. Does the company have, if the strategic goal is regarding that, has there been any kind of an innovation going on in the organization, is another thing. We can do some pre-tests, post-tests, especially with 360 assessments.
Yes.
Where people can we can just watch how the development of the person has changed. As I said, engagement surveys also shed us a light. If people say, like, the engagement scores are going higher, if they say there is more trust, if they say their manager is supporting them better, that can be a good indicator. But we can also use the technology to gather all these data and make some cross criteria checking. Like, if people have gone through a coaching process, their performance levels have gone like this and that.
Yes.
If they are engaged in the process, because in our case, they're going through some digital coaching exercises. Even the correlation between who we call a talent going through the digital coaching exercises give us an indication. Are they really talents? Like, are they really motivated to invest in themselves? Or are they just being chosen by their manager because they basically, get along well? So even though, it really depends on what the organization wants to measure. But what is possible with technology, of course, is then if we could just set those criteria up front, then we can start measuring them, creating data out of them. And then we can calculate and say, like, okay, based on this strategic goal, these are your results.
Very interesting as well, how actually that can, and it seems to make sense to me, but how there can indeed be an impact on people's performance following, of course, a certain coaching program or training that they've had. I think that's really interesting, and that'd definitely be interesting to hear more about how technology can help with this. Could you, though, Ozlem, perhaps, what are some of the most common metrics that you've seen that organizations use to measure actually to measure their coaching efforts? Are there any metrics that you see that come back regularly?
Yeah, very much. The engagement rates, as I said, is one of the core things. Sometimes net promoter scores are also important. If people say, like, it was good measure of my effort, then it's a good match. Sometimes there is a interesting, I would say, result, which is the turnover rates. Sometimes, but it's an interesting one, because sometimes if people are more engaged, the turnover rate starts going down. But if the organization doesn't have a coaching culture, and if people are meeting coaching for the first time, the interesting thing is the turnover rate may go up. So that's why organizations are a little bit reluctant to invest money in coaching. But we always say, like, then you just don't have engaged people, then you just have loyal people who cannot find other jobs in other places, the fact that the fact that they're just continuing with the organization doesn't really mean are the people that you need, especially in these challenging times.
Yes.
So sometimes it's not so bad to start having lower turnover rates after coaching, because what we see, if you take the scenario to a longer period of time, not just the first year, then you start being left with those people who are really good for you, and then you can start building a culture that you like. So that's the turnover one is a tricky one. Like pre-test, post-test, it's also a tricky one, because the more people become aware, sometimes they evaluate themselves differently. First, if they're totally unaware, they say, yeah, I know it, and they don't know what they don't know. So those kind of things are a little bit tricky. That's why we always sit down with an organization and say, like, what do you really want to measure? What would be the effect of it? What might be the effect of it? And then if we can just not measure one thing, if you're just measuring one thing, that could be, as I said, tricky. But if you're measuring all the other stuff next to it, if there are turnovers going maybe up, but the engagement, the happiness of the people in the organization is also increasing. Then that means, like, okay, so we're just getting rid of the not good fits, let's say.
Yes.
So those are quick, tricky stuff, but those are the generally areas that we see.
Okay, well, Ozlem, I have one last question for you, because I see plenty of questions from the audience coming in, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for all your questions. We will get to them in a second, but my last question for you, Ozlem, because we have to touch on this, is of course related to the technology. So in just perhaps a few sentences, if possible, could you perhaps say how HR can benefit or use technology to support and sustain its coaching efforts?
Yeah. Oh, that's my main subject, so it will be kind of tricky to speak shortly. But I would say our audience would hear more and more about digital coaching, but there are different tools regarding that. So I always put a kind of a matrix and say, like, on one level there are, like, do we have the human touch? There are some chatbots where there is no human element involved, where people go through some if then else questions, and they're offered some training tools based on what they found out. So there is that level, no coach person involved, but there is a chatbot, and it's very scalable, but limited on one level. And there are the other digital tools. If you have especially like one leader to coach, if you're looking for a team to coach, those kind of more on the point support, there are some digital coaching solutions that have a matchmaking tool and a coaching pool where you can then select the right coach for the right person. And what we are doing in Sparkus is not these two. We're focusing on how do we keep it scalable, but also keep the human element involved. So what we're doing is we're digitalizing certain portions of the coaching process. We're going to the organization, understanding what their target audience is and what these target audience has to all of them think about, like their first-time managers. They all have, let's say, a delegation issue. They need to first work on that. So all those kind of common, I would say, themes, then we just integrate them into some digital coaching exercises, and then they come together with either a professional coach or a mentor or an internal coaching pool of the organization. So the human element comes afterwards. So there is this option of integrating the technology with the human and to scale it to more people. And it's, of course, when you have the technology, you have the ability to link it with a LMS system of the organization. You can integrate it with some assessments. You can integrate it with some performance development tools that the organization has. Yes. And of course, you can create a lot of reports, data out of a coaching process that is generally, as I said, like a black box.
Yes.
So that's short.
Right. Ozlem, I think you did an amazing job at doing that in such a short time. So thank you very much for that. If you're ready, we're gonna go to the audience questions now, because I see that there's still more coming in. So I'm just gonna start with them and gently throw them at you. So. All right, the first question is coming from Pedro Calado. And the question is, how do you adapt coaching for multiple generations and mixed generation teams?
Oh, great question. Great question. So we're doing lots of reverse mentoring processes to start with. So one level is not only, I mean, when we talk, that actually brings me to a great place. When we're talking about coaching culture, don't necessarily only think about coaching. You can also think about mentoring, for instance. It's very much in line with the coaching culture idea. There is also the, all these criteria we spoke about are somehow involved in mentoring as well. So one way is doing mentoring from the obviously more experienced people to less experienced, but also doing the reverse mentoring from younger generations to older generations.
Yes.
And when the reverse mentoring first started, it was much more limited to teaching technology to older generations.
Yes.
But now we should say that it's a broader area. Most of the time, older generations already know about some level of technology. They already know some basic trends because they're going through some reports, etc. But what they're lacking is the insight of the younger people. So why they're doing something. So if they can just sit down and talk about, like, from the customer's perspective, but also from the employee's perspective, what they want, what they're looking for, that's a good place to start it. And one thing to underline when we're doing the digital coaching exercises, when you're integrating any technology, basically, design is a key issue. So you need to go through, we always do some design thinking process. Sit down with the potential coaches, and try to understand what they really need.
Yes.
And that's very much in line with, I would say, geographies and also generations.
Yes.
So, those all have to be there when you're designing a program. So it has to be a design.
All right. Great answer, if you ask me, Ozlem. I'm going to quickly go to the next question. All right. Here's a question from Jose Ferreira Pinto. And the question is, how have you skilled coaching, or maybe how can you skill coaching, but how have you skilled coaching, and how do you sustain a coaching as a perceived value in the organization? So perhaps start with the how have you skilled coaching. I think we touched about it on it a little bit, but please.
Yeah, sure. As I said, the first thing to start is the design process. So we start with the HR to understand what the strategic goal is for the organization. Because if it's just one person that we're coaching, it's really very much dependent on that person. But if you're talking about scaling coaching in the organization, it obviously has a culture effect. Yeah. So we sit down with the HR, try to understand what their strategic goal is. If it's possible, we also have the conversation with top management. And then we start, as I said, starting the conversation with the potential coaches, try to understand what they need, what they see missing, and then design a process based on that. And we always start with a pilot. We select a small group, first try the idea out, see if it works, receive feedback from them, and then little by little have it open to more people. And if we're talking about going through the whole organization at one point, we always divide it into phases, where we first start with the top management and trickle it down to the to the lower management, and also the employees, generally speaking.
All right. So exactly. First of all, it depends on how many people it needs to be scaled towards to, and then there's this design thinking process you start that you already mentioned, and then you do it in several phases.
And it's also important at different levels, you might provide different coaching support. For top management, you can say, no digital, we're going to do one-on-ones. For mid-management, you can say digital plus one-on-one coaching with a professional coach. And then from lower levels, you can say, we're going to train some internal coaches, or we're going to train the managers to be coaches.
Yeah.
And then people go through the platform and then have the sessions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Let me see what we have. Oh, I think this looks like a nice question as well. It's coming from Rayu Kodwat, and it is, how can we bring empathy into coaching?
Oh, wow.
Actually, perhaps coaching always implies a certain level of empathy. I don't know. That's me assuming something. But yeah, how can we bring empathy into coaching?
I really love it because, like you're saying, Neelie, it does, if it's done well, it involves empathy by its definition. But what's generally happening is people just look at coaching as only a skill set. Like, do I ask a clever question? Do I appear as I'm listening? But
Yes.
I'm then in my mind thinking about the next question that I'm going to ask. Then I just follow some model. Like, it looks like on the paper, it looks like the coaching is done on the format. But if you're too much stuck with the form, then you're really missing the substance. And empathy comes where you have the substance. Recently, I've been to a coaching mastery class, which maybe those over here know it. Marshall Reynolds was doing the training, and she shared when she was first learning coaching. Her teacher told her, when she said, like, I don't know if I can, keep the form, etc. And the teacher said, Thomas Leonard said, just love your clients. I loved it. So it's basically it. You just love the person in front of you. If you just believe in their potential, believe in their ability to grow, and if you just really are there to help them out, then actually all the forms just fall apart, and the whole thing is really about empathy. But yes, people are missing that a lot.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to do a few more because there's so many of them, but we are having to wrap up soon. So I'm just going to do a few more if that's okay with you, Ozlem.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? All right. So, all right. So I have a question here coming from Venus Gilbert. And the question is, how will you inculcate the coaching culture in a very junior level people leaders? So, how do you start? Maybe with people that are on a leadership trajectory, or
but who just become leaders. I think that's a very good group of people to start introducing coaching. Younger generations like being coached, and they like giving coaching, so they're more open. It's in their blood, basically. So when we start introducing them to the idea of how to coach other people, they're just open to it. The how part, how to train young managers to become better coaches, is not so different than young training older generations. Managers are managers. There are, as I said, all those limits of, like, they first need to receive coaching, and their people need to know about what coaching is, etc. So that's the common thing. What comes with the younger generations could be they could be really very open to questioning, and they could be really very much motivated to support their younger employees. They come with less resistance, let's say. So that's great. The other difficult thing is sometimes they come to the whole process with, I know it already. Like, we always hear about this guy who just gets out of the university and says, like, I'm going to be a CEO. So if we're talking about that profile, it takes a while to make them get to the place of recognition of what they don't know. It's not a resistance to coach other people, but it's an internal process going on, asking the smartest question, not staying, the empathy question that just a minute ago, is like not being empathetic enough, could be a case. then we just leave aside all the rest and we first start with the coaching mindset rather than the skill set. Then we start with the curiosity, being there for the other person, not knowing, etc. But it all depends on the audience, I would say.
Yeah, of course.
Both are possible. Both are possible.
Of course. So basically, from the junior level people, we go to a question from Aniruddha Sakia, and the question is, how about coaching people who are at the top level management? What can you tell us in a few words about them?
Yeah, okay, that's the more difficult one, I would say, because they've come there with the with the knowing of what to do. Maybe they've built a business and so they brought the business to some place. So it is a much more resistant group to coaching. But what I see is they're all aware of this fast-changing world, and they're aware that they have to adapt to it. And that, I think, is the opening point for people to be more open to be coached.
Yeah.
And for them, I mean, for the younger people, I would say, for the previous question, I would say, use the technology. They're so much open to it, very much open to it. And, get all the benefits out of coaching. And actually, we always say, with the digital platform, they can binge coach, like they're binge watching Netflix series. They can just go through because they don't have the patience to wait for another session to happen with the coach. So, technology helps them with that. But with the top management, I say never use the platform. So it's like there has to be a very much, but it's not an age thing I'm talking about. The people, the more they get on top of the organization, they're already handled all the, I would say, basics of coaching. Yes. So every top manager has their own story, has their own challenge. So then over there, use the human touch more and more. Coach them, one-on-one. Try to figure out what they need. Of course, you can provide them with some other resources, tools, some articles to read, whatever. But the coaching process itself has to be a very one-on-one with the very top management.
Yes. All right. I'm going to give you two more, Ozlem, and then I'm going to wrap up because they just keep coming, which is fantastic. So
Great.
Once again, to everybody who's watching, thank you so much for the questions. We're going to do
really brilliant questions. Thank you for all of them.
We're really happy with them. So we're going to continue just with a few more. All right. So here's a question from Shripama Pal. And the question is, coaching is one of the important pillars of succession planning. Is there anything specific you can suggest around this? So when it comes to coaching and succession planning.
Very good point. Well, there are two levels, I think, in terms of that. One is who to select in terms of the next person and how to develop that person that we selected. One thing, as I said, if the organization is selecting, let's say, a group of talents, and those talents are going through a coaching process or a leadership development process, doesn't matter. That's where you need the data. That's where technology will help you. Because, as I said, sometimes organizations select saying like this person is a talent based on what the manager really says. But maybe there is a secret person who's doing their work at the back. So you just sometimes don't know if that person is the right talent. So there are, of course, lots of other assessment tools, etc., to know if this person is able to do their work. But what is missing generally is their motivation. Do they really have the motivation to be in this company, to be in this role? And there comes coaching. Then you can, make people do, let's say, a vision board. That's generally what we do. So you can make them describe what motivates them in their work. So if that motivation is a good match with the role that you're looking for, then it makes sense. But sometimes they have the skill set, let's say, to fill that role, but basically they don't like it, and you just are making all your efforts to the wrong person. And never ever in the whole performance development and succession planning area we just don't ask people, what are you really motivated for? We ask their goals, and they just say, like all the other people are doing, to be a leader of something. But
Yeah.
there is no HR process other than coaching that really is aware of if they're motivated to do some part of their work. So coaching comes very handy there. And
Yeah.
then, of course, the other level, which is much more common, is the coaching people once we select them for their development for the new role, to prepare them for the new role. But it's more common practice.
Yes. Yeah. It keeps coming back to everything you said at the beginning, to be honest, right? It's that mindset and the curiosity. But so yeah, all right. We're going to wrap up, but then there's one question here. And that's basically formal or informal coaching, which is the most effective?
Ah, nice question. I always say, I mean, for me, informal, let me define what informal coaching for me means. Informal coaching is coaching in the moment. When you just ask someone when they come to you, for instance, as a manager, and just automatically ask you, what shall I do? And if you just say, like, what have you thought of so far? So if you just start like, why is this bothering you? So that kind of things really are coaching person in the moment, and that's informal coaching for me. It can also mean for other people where you're not officially assigned a coach, but then at the heat of a moment receive coaching from someone. That's another story. But if we're talking about in the moment coaching, I always say that is something like, I'm going to first start with the formal coaching to define this. Formal coaching looks like going to the gym and doing your exercises. So it has a start, it has an end. You just spare that time for the coaching process. You have an agreement with a PA or a PT or something like that. So you have a structure, and you just know when you're there to exercise. So once you have those muscles built, then you have the ability to carry your luggage in the daily time, So once you have the arms really built, then it can come into your life, and that's the informal coaching piece. So for people to be better at coaching people informally, they first need to experience the formal version, and then it works. And it's also vice versa, for people to be open to be coached in the heat of the moment, rather than saying like, are you testing me? Then they first need to get a feeling of how coaching works. They need to get what I call a coaching literacy, to understand how coaching works, to trust the process, trust the person. So the ideal is to have an informal coaching process going on, but it requires a coaching culture, coming back to the original scenario we were talking about.
And I like the analogy. Sorry, I like the analogy you made with the coaching muscle, that basically you need to go to the gym, so to speak, to train it. I very much like that. Yeah. Okay, my really last question here. I think it's related very much to the situation we are currently in. So that's why I think it's a good one to perhaps end this with, is that coaching is even harder when it's either fully online or when it's with a fully remote team. How do you think organizations can best approach it now in a setting with people working much more remotely? Do you have any kind of recently gained insights, or perhaps even older insights regarding this?
Yeah, I think I would start with the older insight. Coaching has been done in the US, not in Europe, I know, and it's different cultures. But originally, when I was being trained almost 15 years ago, it was originally done on the phone. It was not face to face, and we were told to do it on, over the phone, even without the facial expressions. But once you start doing it over the phone, you start recognizing, different the nuances between the voice, etc. So is it possible? Yes, it is definitely possible to do it without face to face. So that's the old experience.
Yes.
The recent experience is, if people are trying to do at the face of, for the first time, we're just not seeing each other, we are going into this virtual teams, etc. If you're just starting from a level of performance coaching, I would say it doesn't work. It first, as I said, I'm coming back to the trust issue. You first need to use the area to build the trust. So I mean, when you're trying to get on a coaching process with your coaches, your employees, your teams, whatever, first leave everything aside and just first start with trust sessions. Just really get to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Just make people heard, hear how they're doing with all this virtual place, and then slowly get into the performance coaching. They first need to have trust to the process, coaching process, trust to you if they don't have it already, and also trust that it works either virtually also. So it's not only a face-to-face process. So first the trust period, and then once you have it, the performance comes.
All right. No matter if you're online or face to face or even on the old-fashioned phone, if those even exists.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I've been giving trainings, and we were having difficulties in terms of going into breakout rooms, and I just made them do the WhatsApp groups. So phone works, and calling each other still works. So just let's not forget that it is a part of our system anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, Ozlem, I could continue literally with you. I think
actually, with this audience, I can also
which is fantastic. We could continue for quite a while, but I'm afraid that we really have to wrap up now. So from me to you, I want to say a huge thank you for joining us today for this episode of AIHR Live, and thank you for sharing all your experience and insights with us. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed your presence, and also, as I said, the wonderful audience that we have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I'm going to say goodbye to you, Ozlem. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Now, from me to you, once again, thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode of AIHR Live. If you are interested in the topics that Ozlem and I discussed, then you may want to take a look at our brand new Learning and Development Certificate program that is fully online and self-paced. And it teaches you all the skills you need to become a strategic learning and development specialist. So it touches on topics like a skills gap analysis, creating an L&D strategy, but also on topics such as coaching. You can find all the information you need about that on our website, AIHR.com, and also on how to subscribe. And then for me, once again, thank you so much for your interaction. You've been a really great audience today, and I hope to see you soon for a new episode of AIHR Live. Thank you very much, and goodbye.